Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ashley Mancini. I'm with the IFA Foundation. We are very excited to be talking today with a wonderful panel. Just kicking things off with a couple introductory remarks, some logistical notes. We're going to be doing kind of a fireside chat discussion today, but throughout all of this, if you have any questions, please submit them in the chat box or in the Q&A panel, and we will pose those to the panelists at the conclusion. You probably just noticed that we are recording today's webinar, so we'll send that recording around to everyone afterwards. We encourage you to share this with people. We also have two programs that we have done throughout the year that are on both the United States Black Chamber website as well as the IFA YouTube page. So we will send those links around, put those in the chat, and we'll send those afterwards. So we've got a lot of resources that you can reference, take advantage of, share with your colleagues. And we will go ahead and just get started. I'm going to turn things over to Jim Fliss with KeyBank. KeyBank has been a very important partner and sponsor of the Diversity Institute at the IFA Foundation. We're very thankful for all of their support throughout the years. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it to you, Jim.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jim Fliss, National Head of SBA Banking at KeyBank, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the third of a four-part webinar series on opportunities in franchising for Black entrepreneurs. As mentioned, KeyBank has provided the underwriting resources for this series, and we're honored to partner with both the International Franchise Educational Foundation and the U.S. Black Chamber of Commerce. Key's purpose is to help our clients and communities to thrive. We sponsored this series because we are focused on small business growth and success and opportunities for all entrepreneurs. Our longstanding partnership with and commitment to organizations such as the IFA and the Black Chamber of Commerce comes naturally. At Key, we recognize the critical role that these organizations have in advancing economic recovery and entrepreneurial success. And we firmly believe that when individuals come together in partnership, it's possible to reshape and revitalize communities and the way in which its members care for one another. KeyBank's groundbreaking $16.5 billion national community benefits plan started in 2017, and it's a shining example of Key's purpose. Since our plan began, KeyBank has invested billions of dollars supporting small businesses and home lending in low and moderate income communities, affordable housing and community development projects, and philanthropic efforts targeted towards education, workforce development, and safe and vital neighborhoods. Recently, we fulfilled our aggregate goal ahead of schedule and have increased our national commitment to $40 billion. Our investments will continue to focus on economic access and equity for underserved communities and populations. So on behalf of KeyBank and our 17,000 teammates nationally, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We hope that you're inspired and motivated by the information and resources available. With that, I'll turn it over to Philip Dunn at the U.S. Black Chamber. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks so much for your support of the IFA and, of course, your indirect support of the USBC. And I also want to thank my counterpart, Ashley. I want to thank Ricky, the IFA leadership, and our team moderator and panel. Now, Jim mentioned I'm Philip Dunn. I'm the program manager with USBC. And I'm so proud to be here. And on behalf of our president, Ron Busby Sr., our board and our staff, I want to thank all of you for your continued support and your leadership in the area of franchising. So as you all may know, the USBC, we have 5 pillars, and those 5 pillars are advocacy, access to capital, contracting, entrepreneurial training, and chamber development. We feel that the IFA is a perfect partner in support of our mission, our vision, and those 5 pillars. So you may also know that on June of this year, our very own president, Ron Busby Sr., shared that his franchise experience was very valuable and instrumental in his journey to starting the USBC. I encourage all of our audience members to listen in and take notes, and then also listen to our panelists as they share their experience as well. Thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Ashley.
I think that throat was to me, Phil. But Ashley, am I correct?
You're correct, Stan. Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, time appropriate. I'm Stan Friedman, and I am your moderator today. I'm a founding member of the IFA's Diversity Institute and a proud member of its Minorities and Franchising Committee, which predated the Diversity Institute by several years. In 1997, when some of you weren't yet born, I was at a company called Blimpie Subs and Salads as VP of Global Development, and a mandate that was given to me by senior management, who then was a gentleman named Chuck Linus, who was on the IFA board of directors at the time. Chuck's mandate to me was, Stan, you're going to give 40 hours a week to Blimpie as global VP. You're also going to give 40 hours a month to the International Franchise Association, and you're going to do the heavy lifting. I sit on the board, I get the credit, you do the work. And that's kind of the way it worked out in the beginning. I was surprised when Chuck said he wanted to seat me on the IFA's Minorities and Franchising Committee as the place that he wanted my focus and dedication. And he explained Blimpie, being a Hoboken-based company at that time, was very much an inner city organization. Blimpie's growth in the growth years were in the mid-Atlantic and the DC, Philly markets, and New York City and the surrounding metropolitan area. And diverse communities were an extremely important part of Blimpie's growth and development and culture. And so when I took my seat on the Minorities and Franchising Committee in 1997, we were in a much different time than we're in right now. The only conversations I could have with my peer group about the things that were important about diversity and franchising were all based on business decisions and business sense. And it was the times that we are in today that enable so much of an enlightenment to the social and moral responsibilities around diversity and franchising that weren't really talked about back then. It was just a business case. Well, today, the business case is still every bit as strong, and the other imperatives have come along for the ride. And it's a thrill and a pleasure for me to have done all the work I've done in this space over these years, lead to the last 10 years where I've begun working with professional athletes and helping professional athletes transition from the court or the field to the business of franchising, and bringing so many of their transferable skills from playbooks to ops manuals. And you'll learn a little bit more about the Pro Athlete Franchise Initiative, I suspect, in part of our conversation today in just a few minutes when our panel discussion gets underway. This is going to be a panel discussion, a forum, if you will. We've got plenty of time to have a conversation today and entertain your questions either throughout or at the end. If time is left and there are more questions, we're here for the full 90 minutes if the conversation takes us there. But that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a conversation, and it's going to be a passionate conversation about passion and purpose, and what happens when the two of those can come together in the realm of franchising, and how your background can prepare you for certain industries, and how bringing the two together with our panel discussion with Kim and Rebecca today are going to take a look at this from both directions, from the science of making right decisions about right brands at the right place at the right time, and from Kim Crowell, who is sitting at the head of the table of a tremendously successful franchisee organization and has recently too been seated as a board member on the International Franchise Association's board of directors. I think with that, it may be time that I make some introductions, and let's start with Kim Crowell. And Kim, I'm going to ask you the same question that after you've given yourself a little bit of an introduction to the audience, I'll start with my first question. Let's introduce yourself first, though.
Thanks, Stan, and thank you guys so much for having me. It's indeed an honor and a pleasure. Again, my name is Kim Crowell, and I'm actually the founder and principal of a company called Kalo Companies that was founded by my husband and I back in 2010. We are Jersey Mike Subs franchisees, and we currently have 40 locations across 3 states, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. We just have continued to grow over the last 10 years and are really excited to continue building a great organization.
So, Pam, let's talk about something that happened in your life 10 or 11 years ago and why it was that you and Angelo, well, explain about Angelo first, and then let's talk about why you guys were doing what you were doing in search of information on franchising.
Absolutely. So we'll start back probably a little bit earlier in our lives. We were actually college sweethearts. We met at the University of Virginia, and he was playing football, and I went to school, focused on academics and, just following the timeline and expectations that, were set for me, which, led me to go to law school. And, just realizing during that time that, there was always this entrepreneurial spirit in me, having worked since I was 15, loving having just sort of a side business that I didn't have to go and ask my parents for money. That was always something sort of in the back of my head. And so we would just dream as we dated, what would it look like if we were to own our own business together? And so we jumped forward while I'm in law school, he's playing in the NFL. And he actually had an older brother who played in the NFL as well. And he asked him, I think, a very poignant question early on in his career. And he asked him, he said, if the game ended today, what would you do? And I remember at the time he said, I don't want to coach. I don't want to go into, broadcasting. I'm not really sure. So at that time, we just started to kind of research what are some businesses that athletes have been able to transition into successfully, because you always hear the horror stories about people starting new businesses and they fail. At least that was the impression that I had. And I was very nervous about jumping into something that we didn't have the proper tools for. So once we started just kind of doing some research, we realized that franchising was a model and a business model that other athletes had been able to successfully go into. So that's when we really started doing our research. And, I think for someone like me who needs sort of the structure and, likes to have systems and processes already in place, the idea of being able to, have a playbook in order to operate a business while it's still our business and we're growing our organization, it's really important that, we had, tools in a toolbox that we could pull out, or a playbook, so to speak. And, certainly coming from, the athletic world and understanding how that works, I think it was just a match made in heaven to go into a business where we knew, okay, there's a playbook. We just need to execute this playbook properly and at least have potential for success in that way.
Excellent. In my excitement to get to you, Kim, I ran right past Ricky, and there I was thinking I was going to do a perfect job today, and I've made my first mistake. So Ricky Amos, and my apologies to you, Ricky. I was supposed to throw your way first, but let me ask you to spend a minute or two talking about the IFA's commitment to diversity, the IFA's educational foundation, and the great work that all of us get an opportunity to do because you just make it look so easy. Ricky?
Well, thank you, Stan. And please don't apologize and don't worry. What I'm sitting here thinking about is the opportunity to hear from Kimberly and her story, and all of us being on this panel together is just the embodiment of what we are trying to achieve at the IFA Foundation. So in terms of, talking about passion meeting purpose, the IFA Foundation is the 501c3, kind of think of it as the corporate social responsibility arm of the International Franchise Association. We are focused on trying to raise awareness of the franchise business model and amplify the good news story of how it is positively impacting individuals and communities across the country and around the world. And when I think about how excited I am to be here today, and we are at the foundation, it's because we have great partners like KeyBank. And first, I want to say thank you to KeyBank for their just belief and their support to do programming like this. critical to our function and support of franchising is to just reach out and spread the word to as many as we can about the availability of opportunities through franchising, and then connecting dots to stories like Kimberly's and her families who were showing about how this really works, and what they have learned. And to our partners in the U.S. Black Chamber and its members in reaching out, I think Philip said it so well. We share a passion for trying to reach and elevate communities of color, underrepresented individuals, the Black entrepreneur, and being able to share our content, our passion, your audience, and vice versa is, I think, just so important. Together we're going to reach more people and educate more people and support them in realizing their small business dreams. So our job at the foundation is we work on veterans programs. As you so eloquently described, we have our Diversity Institute that is reaching out and educating communities of all different types from around the country. And we want to connect information and opportunity and awareness and just examples of how people are doing that. So, my thanks to everybody being here to make that possible today, because this is where the intersection of passion and purpose for the IFA Foundation come to life. So with that, I'm going to put myself back on mute so we can get back and talking to our panelists and sharing those examples. And I'm happy to contribute however I can.
Thanks, Ricky. And don't go too far, because we're going to bring it into the discussion on the panel as well. Same with you, Jim. Hope you're going to be able to join us. Phil, Jim, for the remainder of the program to contribute wherever you feel moved to do so. And Rebecca Monet, it's my turn now to introduce my friend, Rebecca Monet, who, when it comes to passion and purpose, she's built a business about bringing the two of those together. Rebecca, will you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I would love to. Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist behind Zorakle Profiles. The Zorakle tool helps franchisors and franchise brokers facilitate a right fit with a prospective franchisee. The goal, of course, is finding the right fit for someone who wants to go in business. And talk about passion and purpose. Zorakle also sponsors a podcast called The Franchise Woman, where passion and purpose collide. So this is right up my alley. I'm so excited to be part of this panel.
Tell us a little bit about Zorakle, and we're going to introduce some of that into the conversation here today. But I think a lot of what we want to really talk about today goes beyond just the everyday things that people will think about when considering a franchise opportunity. On the Jim Fliss side of the equation, people are always told you've got to have money, you've got to have the right amount of net worth, the right amount of liquidity, you have to have skin in the game, you have to be able to be bankable and presentable with a business plan. All of the nuts and bolts and those issues are the things that most people immediately think about. But there's another side to this equation as well, and that's the fit with a culture, the fit with the right size organization to match your entrepreneurial spirit. There are things that aren't often thought about. And Rebecca, you built a business around helping to mitigate the risks for people who may make a great decision for a brand that fits them, but maybe the wrong size company in that brand. So talk a little bit about those things that are available for our audience to learn about as they start learning about doing the discovery of franchise opportunities.
Great points that you make, Stan. Absolutely. There are many that I believe could be business owners that have not found the right business simply because they don't always know what to look for. And it really is, I always say it's two parts. It's what will make you compatible within a franchise system, which goes back to what you talked about, Stan. Do I fit within this culture of this franchise organization? do I fit within the stage of growth that this franchisor is in? Am I someone that's going to fit better in an early stage franchise organization where it's still dynamic and I can push the boundaries and I can be innovative? Or am I someone that fits better in a more established franchise organization where I can embrace the systems, leverage the system, replicate and scale? Who am I in this whole evolution of what we call stages of growth? And then the other thing when we're talking about, am I compatible, is we're choosing a partner. The franchisor is choosing a partner with his franchisee. The franchisee's choosing a partner with her franchisor. And we want to know, are we compatible from a values perspective? Do we share values? Because if we don't share values, there's going to be some disharmony within that. It also goes a long way to understanding one another. It goes a long way to retention of that franchisee if we share values. It's the same in a marriage. It's the same in a business partner. If we have a values alignment, we're going to have greater harmony, greater retention, greater satisfaction. But from a Zorakle perspective, it's about performance. There's going to be greater performance. So the second part of that, of course, is we want someone to be compatible. We want them to have the right personality. We want them to fit in the values. We want them to fit in the stage of growth. We want them to fit in the culture, but we also need them to have the right skill sets. And you've been in enough businesses over these years to know one business requires a certain skill set and another business requires other skill sets. Some businesses require very strong sales skills and maybe leadership skills and HR and training skills, and other businesses require maybe more management and an operations and a finance kind of skill sets. So it really is about, who am I compatible with? What companies am I compatible with? And do I have the skills to run that business? And then, of course, the big piece that we're talking about today is, do I have the heart? Do I have the passion? Is there something here that says I should be part of that business?
Thank you, Rebecca. Kim, I'm going to turn to you now to bring to life so much of what Rebecca just articulated, in that 10 or so years ago when I met you at the Pro Athlete Summit at, I think it was Emory University, is the first one that we did. You were fortunate enough to be at that summit taking notes as fast as your hand could write. But Jersey Mike's was there, and Jersey Mike's was a sponsor. And I know that Jersey Mike's isn't the only thing you looked at, but at the time it was the only thing you decided on. And I have a suspicion that culture had a lot to do with that. Why don't you speak to some of that as it pertains to your situation?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I mean, my experience with Jersey Mike's actually went even farther back than the first PAFI Summit. And it really was, at the time, my boyfriend, now husband, liked the product, and it was North Carolina was the first state that they were franchising in. So I got introduced to the product just simply, or the brand simply just through going in there and enjoying the food. And I remember him telling me, one of the franchisees that lived in his hometown would always kind of keep up with him, and just always made him feel special. And I thought that was something unique. You don't always get that sort of connectivity when you're in and out of a business. And so jump forward to when we're looking into franchising and getting reintroduced into Jersey Mike's, one of the things we were looking at is just how much we were aligned, to Rebecca's point, with the values. For those of you who have been to Jersey Mike's, you understand that some of our mottos are give to give, make a difference in someone else's life. And I think that was something that really resonated with us even in the beginning. Just from a fit standpoint, we felt like if we're going to go into business, it's important that we recognize, the impact that we could have on other people. And so, we've always said to ourselves, we are blessed to be a blessing. And that's really what has spurred our continued growth with the brand, simply because, it's about our people. And I think that's something that Jersey Mike's, we just were really aligned with that from early on. And I think, knowing what I know now, I think that was exactly what we were meant to do, because that is something that's very important. And I think if you're considering different brands, you really need to look at it from both perspectives. Yes, you want to understand the operational results side of things and how the business itself works, but at the same time, are you going to agree with, maybe the brand standards or some of their initiatives? Do those align with your values? And for us, Jersey Mike's was really a great fit, and we continue to sort of find our passion and are living our passion, I think, every day. But I think to what Rebecca was saying, I mean, being able to connect the value and culture piece along with just doing your due diligence on what the brands and what they represent, I think that's key in your search to finding the right franchise.
And from the other direction, it's every bit as important that franchisors make the appropriate decisions about the franchisees that they invite to join their brands, and that there is cultural alignment from the top down as well. I think a perfect example of that is one that I give often, which is Chick-fil-A. You can be a prospective Chick-fil-A franchisee and think you've got the ultimate location that's going to do more business on Sundays than it will the other 6 days of the week. And guess what? You're not going to be a Chick-fil-A franchisee if you think you're going to be open on Sunday, because it's not allowed and it's not part of their culture. And so their passion and their purpose are driven by strong values, and Sunday is a closed day for that brand, no matter what location you think might be served best or serving its community best. On a Sunday, it's just not part of the culture. Rebecca, I want to ask, how does somebody looking to get into our space and get into franchising today help themselves learn more about where their passion lies and help them figure out how to be less overwhelmed about considering what kinds of brands to choose or what kinds of businesses to be in? I think that today, given that the pandemic has changed so many of our priorities, not everybody in this audience can afford to be a Jersey Mike's franchisee. It's a heavy capital lift to open a brand like that. But there are many other brands out there now, and there are people that are not going back to work that are looking to change their lifestyles and to get into a business that maybe fits best with mom staying at home and working from home with kids instead of being in a 40-hour or 50, 60-hour work week at an office. So how do you go about that, Rebecca? How can Zorakle help those in our audience get a handle on what matters first to them so that they can understand how to present themselves properly to franchises that they may be considering?
I think this topic of passion and purpose is so relevant right now, because during these last 18 months or so, folks have had time at home to ponder life, to decide what's really important. Prior to that period of time, it was get up, shower, get dressed, get on the train, go to the office, right? And these last few months have had us consider, who are we at the core? What is it we are wired to be, and what are we here for, right? And is there a way for us to determine what that is and express it through a business? And the answer, I believe, is yes, but it requires this know thyself kind of attitude. I think it was some major philosopher that talked about this is the first step always. Kim and Angelo knew themselves, right? They knew what was important and what drove them, and they knew they wanted to be a blessing, and they knew that they were looking for a business that in turn would allow them to do that in a larger scale and in a local marketplace. So step one is always know thyself, right? Figure out who you are and the way that you want to express yourself in life. Where are you going in the future? What are your gifts and talents? I think sometimes we get confused between I'm interested in something rather than there's something burning inside that's a passion that may even be a purpose that we haven't yet been able to articulate. So step one always, in my opinion, Stan, is know thyself. Take some time to discover who you are, and then put yourself out in the future and look back to today and ask yourself, kind of in a reverse engineering way, how at the end of my life did I live my life? Did I express it the way I wanted to express? How are we going to leave a legacy? And this is particularly important because Stan, I know you just lost your best friend. He left a legacy. He knew why he was here and the purpose that he had in life. And he expressed it to the world of franchising day in and day out. It's something we all want to do, but we're not all able to articulate. So goal one, know thyself.
Kim, you and Angelo are running a business that features a very popular and very lovable brand and appeals to a great many, as it did to you. I mean, you said you were first introduced to Jersey Mike's by loving the product. But loving the product isn't enough in terms of loving the business, is it? Because running a business isn't the same as consuming the product that the business serves. So can you speak a little to the audience about how to put that into balance as they do their discovery?
Absolutely. So, just to give it some context, when we, first started talking to Jersey Mike's back in 2009, no one really knew about Jersey Mike's. There were only about 300 locations nationwide. And while they were trying to grow, it really wasn't a very popular brand as it is today. And so one of the things that really drew us to them, in addition to their purpose and mission statement, was for us to have the opportunity to grow with a brand, right? So if we're looking at franchising, thinking, okay, we have no restaurant experience, we just have, sheer grit, and we believe in ourselves and we want to do something together, they took a risk on us too, right? And so it allowed us to sort of start at an earlier stage of a franchise and continue to grow with them. If we were looking at Jersey Mike's today and came to Jersey Mike's with the same lack of experience, we probably wouldn't get our foot in the door. But at the time, I think they were looking for those franchisees that were committed to operational excellence, that wanted to be part of the local community. And so I think when you're looking at different franchises, understanding sort of where they are in their growth cycle is also really important, because we've been able to continue to grow along with the brand. And so now, yes, 10 years later with 2,000 stores, there's lots of benefits we've been able to see at that point. But early on, we really, it took us forever. People used to say Jimmy John's all the time and never had heard of Jersey Mike's. So I think that's something to really consider, is where the brand is. Is it an emerging brand? Is it a little bit more mature? And ask those tough questions of the franchisor. What are your plans? Are you owned by a private equity company? Do you plan to sell to, do you plan to go public? What is your growth strategy? How many locations are you building? How much support are we going to get? Those are all of the key things I think you need to ask as well.
Well, Rebecca, I don't think we could have set the table any better than to come back and talk about how a Zorakle spot-on profile helps assess whether you should be at a stage 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 company. And I think before you talk about that, I want to just not tease the audience, but let them understand that everyone who's viewing this today is going to get an opportunity to log on to the Zorakle spot-on profile at absolutely no cost to you, to learn how to start figuring out what kind of company should I be looking to join if I go into franchising, and what size company. And Rebecca, speak more to why that is such an important consideration, as Kim just set it up for you.
Again, it was something that Kim and Angelo understood in terms of how they were wired. When you look at Kim's spot-on profile, She scores in what we call a stage 2 or stage 3 franchise organization. And she has an entrepreneurial side. So where Jersey Mike was a perfect place. It still had some room to breathe and for her to bring her innovation and her ideas to the table, and lots of room to continue to replicate and to scale. But it also was established enough that it had systems and processes and best practice and some brand awareness. It wasn't international yet, right? But it had some brand awareness. So it wasn't an emerging baby Zor, but it wasn't an empire brand either. So this was a perfect fit when Kim was considering the right business for her. And the questions that Kim was asking, you know, and some of this comes from the lawyer side of her and the thinker side of her that knew the right questions to ask about what are the plans? Are you going to go public? What's your leadership like? I want to look at your FDD, all things that Kim would naturally do. When you're looking at the idea of stages of growth, what you're looking at is the managerial style of the franchisor, the organizational structure, where are the decisions made, who's in charge, how formal the systems are, because they're going to evolve and they're going to change as the franchisor goes through these 5 predictable stages of growth. And then what are the initiatives, the strategic goals? Again, questions that Kim asked and Angelo asked of Jersey Mike's are all built into this stages of growth idea. And then the final component is to look at how involved the concept originator is. Usually the concept originator is just hands-on in those early stages, and then he or she slowly backs out of their business, especially if a private equity firm comes in and scoops them up. But at some point that founder will back off. And as we've all seen in the franchise space, when that happens, the culture begins to change, whether it's because a private equity firm bought them or the concept originator, who was the heart of the organization, is now stepping back through retirement or something else. And there's different types of leadership. So stages of growth and where that franchisor is going is a vital piece of that decision-making process for our franchisees.
And in a practical manner of speaking, one could find and discover about themselves the kinds of brands that would be beneficial for them. In other words, some people, we've seen more and more of this with millennials and then Gen X, Y, and Z. We trade in more than one currency. Money is important to us, but what's important to us also is the values of the company that we may be representing and the giving back to the community that we're talking so much about today. And you might find that you've identified the kind of a brand or the kind of a concept that's right for you. If you're a giving kind of a person, you want to be with a benevolent kind of company. You want to be with a brand that takes care of elders or kids. But there are then several more decisions within the scope of that market segment where you may be looking at a stage 5 company when you should be at a 1 or a 2, or the other way around. So really important that you continue peeling that onion back far enough so that you get the right alignment, not just with the business model itself and whether it fits your needs and requirements, but how they go about doing what they do. And if you're in alignment with that as well, based on their size. Kim, I want to ask you another question that has to do with the home side of the relationship of being in business with your boyfriend and then husband and your spouse, and in his prior career, being part of the business wasn't an option for you, but not being part of the business today is not an option either. So how do you balance that? How do you balance the family, the stresses of the business that you need to leave at the office, I suppose, and put separation between personal and business lives? How does that work out for you?
That's a great question, and it could probably be its own panel on in and of itself. And I would love to just be in the audience.
But it is an important consideration for the audience.
Sure,
isn't it?
sure. And I think too, it also, whether it's a spouse or a business partner, I think they go hand in hand because it's about a relationship. You know, for us early on, he wasn't involved in the business. He was still playing football. But once he retired and came out and we were, you know, hand in hand in the business, we realized really early on the importance of lanes. We had to identify, you know, who was going to be responsible for what, because I think in a business such as a franchise where there may be a husband and wife team or two partners, your team and your company needs to know, you know, who do I need to go to for what, or they may, you know, ask me one thing, but ask him the same thing. And if we give two different answers, we're not providing a lot of consistency and continuity within our own business. And so, you know, from the business side, we really, we view it as a partnership and understand what each other's strengths are and weaknesses are, and we build off of that. And then, you know, to be honest, from the home side, we adopt that same attitude. I mean, we're partners. And one of the things we always say is that, you know, it doesn't always have to be equal per se, 50-50, but it needs to be equitable in terms of what we're doing. So, you know, having the ability to have, you know, not only built a business as well as a family over the last 10 years, I think it's important. We use the same sort of ideas of here are our lanes in business as we do with our family. And then the other piece to that I love is, you know, we're able to be really intentional when it comes to the family stuff. We've been able to make sure that, okay, Fridays at 1 o'clock, we're going to shut it down and make sure that we have family fun day with our 2 young kids or things like that. And we're also able to bring them up in the business. They come to our grand openings. You know, we have them stretching bread, even if they're 5. Don't tell anybody. We're not breaking any labor laws, but you know, we try to incorporate them into everything that we do so that they understand, you know, our goal in getting into franchising was to leave a legacy, to build something bigger than ourselves. And that's not just for our children. That's really for our organization as a whole. I mean, sometimes people ask us, you know, well, how many stores do you guys want to get to? Or, you know, and we always say, why do we need to put a ceiling on it? Why can't we continue to grow? If we have the people who believe in what we want to do and they want to grow, that's why we grow, you know, and that's really what to Rebecca's point, I really feel like that's part of our purpose is that we try to build this organization that allows for more opportunities for more people. And so, you know, understanding that I think is some of the driving force in how we've been able to go from one, you know, to this many locations, because it hasn't been about Kim and Angelo. This was a dream. We wanted to start a business together, but we also wanted to leave an impact. So I think that's something when you're thinking about know thyself, really understanding, you know, what does this look like for you? Not everybody wants to be a multi-unit operator, and that is totally fine, but know yourself and understand, you know, going into it, that it's okay to, you know, reach for the moon, you know, and if you have the grit and you got and understand yourself well enough to know, okay, these are the skill sets that I bring to the table. And, you know, if I follow this playbook, I have the potential to be successful, then I think, you know, you're going into it with the right frame of mind.
Kim Fliss, I haven't come your way and you haven't jumped in, but I'm about to bring it into the conversation and ask you from a banker perspective, how important are these considerations? And when a business plan is being presented to you for a potential franchise, are you questioning not just the numbers, but the intention of why are you doing this? Or what is your end game? Or what's your exit strategy? How does that look?
Yeah, I think I would agree with, you know, everything that's been said so far. I think, you know, people need to certainly reflect on long and hard on what type of business that they want to get into. And I'll share a quick personal story. You know, my father had worked at a large corporation for 25 years. And was let go, and kicked around, tried to find a franchise to sort of supplement or to drive a new income for him. And he, I don't think was true to himself and didn't do a lot of self-reflection in terms of what type of business he was truly going to be able to manage. He was a strong general sales manager at a large corporation, got into a franchise where there was a lot of HR and turnover type of people issues, and it just was not a good fit. So you take this person with, presumably a pretty good pedigree and pretty good background, didn't do a lot of the self-reflection that was necessary, wasn't honest with himself in terms of, what he really wanted to get into, and ultimately, I think made a bad decision. So that's something that when I first got into banking, and I've reflected on that over the years. So I think, people need to really be honest and do a lot of self-reflection on what their true purpose, their true calling, where they're best aligned, what the best fit is. And that definitely correlates with success well beyond just the franchise itself.
Appreciate that, Jim. I'm going to share a quick story that I think I brought forward in our little green room conversation yesterday. Back in my days as a chicken wing franchisor, we were a takeout and delivery business, and being in our stores was paramount at night and on weekends. And I had a guy present himself for a multi-store deal that was overqualified in every possible way. He was just a terrific consummate franchise prospect, until I learned close to the end of our cycle of 5 or 6 weeks of going back and forth with some discovery questions. He was a single parent, and he had 2 young kids, and he had help at home, but oh my gosh, what a mistake it would have been to award a franchise to a single dad who's got to be in the business every night, every weekend. What are we going to do on holidays? Dad, I need help with homework. The key to the door, the front door of that store would have become like a lead ball for him after a very short period of time. And so I think this again points to the need to really make the considerations you're making with both sides of your brain fully engaged. You not only need spousal and family support like Angelo and Kim have, but you really need to be thinking about the impact on a business that you may be entertaining, getting into, and what that's going to look like as it relates to engagement with your family, even if they're not involved in the business. Is your commitment to that business going to be like the gentleman that I said no to because he couldn't possibly succeed without doing so at the detriment of his children, which is certainly not something I wanted my fingerprints on. So you have to think with both sides of your brain. You have to really engage the logical as well as the emotional side. It's not like going and buying a car and you can trade it right in. This is a long decision. It's a life decision. And it requires that you really are in balance. Rebecca, I'm going to ask you to comment on that because you're the scientist. I'm just the practitioner.
Well, and your best practice is one that we should all listen to as franchisors. You acted in an honorable way and helped this man make his decision. In fact, you took the option off the table for him. And I would encourage all franchisors to know your candidate, like Stan knew his candidate, and to know your own system. If this individual fits within that organization, they're going to be your brand advocates. They're going to be happy or unhappy depending on how well they fit. They're going to be successful or unsuccessful depending on what skills they bring to the table and your training. So I want to commend you. This was an honorable thing to do, but it's not an easy thing to do if you're a franchise development guy, franchise development salesperson, where your mortgage is dependent on that next commission, right? And this is a great candidate. It's someone that from a competencies perspective could grow a great business, but from a fit perspective and from a values perspective, in this case, family, it was not a fit. it was not a fit, and you were able to say no even before he was able to say no. And I think that's a testament not just to your character, but to the model of franchising and why it's so important to make sure this individual is where you are as a franchise system, that they're a good fit and they have what it takes to grow a business.
Excellent, excellent. Kim, do you want to add anything to any of this before I shoot my next question your way?
Sure. I'd love to just offer a perspective to a potential franchisee based on that scenario. That's where I think it's also really critical that you use the FDD and they have a list of all the franchisees, either that are former and current. And that's where you reach out to them and ask questions, not just about what are your financials, how much money do you make, but what is your day-to-day like? Tell me a day in the life of you operating this particular business. What are your biggest challenges? What are the things you love the most about it? And I think you can also get a lot of information from that perspective, because if you're somebody who values family time and you're interested in a franchise where it's, a 24-hour business where you're going to be that person getting the call regardless of what's happening and what time of night it is, you may say, you know what, everything sounds good, but that's not the quality of life I want. And so I would encourage anyone who's considering any franchise to call up people. We get calls all the time from potential franchisees asking questions about what it's like to run the business, and especially as a single store operator, what does that day-to-day look like? Because I think one thing I learned early on is, the hardest is, to get to one, right? And to get one. And if you don't succeed at one, you definitely can't have two, and you certainly can't have five, and so forth. So understanding what you're willing to perhaps sacrifice, because if you come in and say, like for us, we knew we didn't get into it just to have one. We wanted to build something bigger. So we knew, okay, but in order to get to bigger, we've got to hit the ball out of the park on number one. And we knew it would be a huge sacrifice just in our life. But at the time we had no children, and we were able to dedicate that time and energy and effort into really making sure that we were stable enough to go from one to two and so forth. So I would strongly encourage any potential franchisee to just really do your research and talk to other franchisees, both with the brand and those who have left the brand.
Excellent, excellent information. Ashley, I'm going to ask you if there are any questions coming our way that I'm not aware of, but should be.
Great, thanks, Dan. We actually did just get a question that I think is very timely for this part in the discussion. And I will say that this is something that has come up on both of our two previous webinars as well. And the question came in that is, what about franchise candidates who intend to keep their full-time jobs? Is it possible to start a franchise, succeed at that franchise while keeping a full-time job?
Well, as a Zor and a recovering Zor, I can tell you that yes, it is, but it depends on what the brand is. So right. These are the questions that you need to ask as you're doing, just as Kim said, if you're looking at a brand that's going to be inconsistent with your values and why you're getting into a franchise, then you're looking at the wrong brand. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking at franchising. You should just be looking at a brand that doesn't require that level of engagement from you. And there are some brands that do require full-time engagement. There are some that require that it become your job, and there are others that require that at least you're engaged in the business, but you're not necessarily the operator of the business on a daily basis. But that's a one-off question that you should ask each and every brand that you consider, because the answers are not consistent. They're going to be different everywhere that you look.
Stan, I would agree with that. It does depend, from a banker's perspective, it does depend on the brand. But I would also say you need to think long and hard about your level of commitment and engagement to the business. And even though franchising provides a model, a playbook, a roadmap, structure, a lot of tremendous benefits, there is no substitute, in my opinion, for being there and being present and being engaged with the business, you know? So I agree. Some brands will be less intensive, will require less of your sort of day-to-day, but many businesses, even with that playbook, still require you be there. And frankly, going back to what I was saying on my, from my dad's perspective, he was a professional sales manager, and he was in a business that he needed to be there, that was turning people over, and he needed to have his hands on the clay. And, and he didn't like that part of the job. That was how it sort of played out. So
I'm reminded of Stephen Covey's great saying about beginning with the end in mind, to where Angelo and Kim began knowing that they were going to build an empire, and why put a ceiling on it was I love that. Why put a number on it? Our goal is to make it as big as it can be, and as long as it's as good as it can be. And other people may have a much different goal. They may have a 5-year or a 10-year plan, or they may have a plan for legacy and leaving it to their kids, or cashing out in 10 years. All of these are things that you should be considering as you decide which are the right brands for you. Rebecca, any thoughts there before we move on?
Well, this is an interesting topic. One of the things that we do assess is someone capable, as Jim pointed out, of running a business while building a career. And there are indeed some individuals that we call true ladder climbers. So the way to wealth for them is to be agile and smart and climb that corporate ladder. This does not preclude them from being franchisees if they have other attributes, right? And they're very good at managing managers, etc. But if you are a true ladder climber, your success is going to come from staying in your career. And there needs to be a decision made at some point. How soon are you ready to step into that business? So my opinion on it is, it goes back to what Kim and I have been talking about, is you really need to know yourself, and you need to know that business model. And then to Jim's point, if we're looking at financing, et cetera, are you able to get financing if you're not also in that business more hands-on? And that's going to be part of the equation.
So Kim, at what stage would it be the appropriate time for a prospective franchisee to be firing these kinds of questions off to brand leadership? Do you want to get this out of the way before you fall in love with the brand, or do you want to first find out if this is a brand that may make sense and then ask those questions later? What do you think about the right progression of dealing with those matters?
I mean, I think you start first with just what interests you, right? And target those brands first. What do you think you may be interested in? And then once you start engaging in those conversations, I think you really do need to understand that business's philosophy. The sooner the better, because what you don't want to have happen is that you go all the way down the road till you're about to sign your franchise agreement and then realize, this isn't going to be the right fit for me. So I think the sooner you arm yourself with that information, the better. And just ask those questions. And really, again, I can't harp on it enough. Just understand, who you are. To Jim's point about the financing piece, there's, hundreds, probably thousands of brands out there. In our perspective, despite the fact that, I had a professional athlete as a husband, we had no restaurant experience. So, the access to capital can be a challenge. And so you really want to consider, if this is a capital intensive investment that you're going to make into a particular brand, you may have to suck it up for a little bit and maybe continue your current job while you're trying to build the brand. But you need to really go in eyes wide open and make sure that you're going to be able to kind of continue to do both until you can get to a place where maybe you can pull back from your full-time, from your current job. Because it definitely, at least in our perspective, I think lenders do want to see, okay, how are you going to be able to make this loan payment? If I give you this money, but you don't have any income coming in, how can I be assured that I'm going to get paid back? And you need to take that into consideration.
All right, so I want to leave time for us to be able to help the audience, and I'm going to ask Ashley for help here to help the audience learn how they're going to be able to take a Zorakle profile and learn more about themselves. And once they've got that information in hand, what I want to spend the next few minutes talking about before we shift gears to another important topic is how to go about, now that you've learned all this about yourself, now that you've got all this information about the culture and the alignment and where you think you fit based on what you've learned from being a Zorakle intelligent about yourself. How do you go about hitting the road and getting this started? What do you do? How do you then go about discovering which brands you should be talking to, and how do you go about doing it? Who wants to take that? I'll do it if no one. I mean, there are lots of portals and there are lots of online resources to help you get basic information about brands. But before you do just what Angelo and Kim did and say, well, I love Jersey Mike's, so let's start there. Operating a business is not necessarily going to be the same experience as enjoying being a customer of that business. I promise you that being the guy that gets the wings delivered to the door is a much different experience than being the guy standing over the fryer and having those wings ready to go out the door for delivery. So
Yeah.
you need to get.
I have an opinion on that, Stan.
Yeah.
I think any wise investor in a business knows to ask for wise advice. Go to those that know more than you do. Attorneys, CPAs, bankers, franchise consultants, others who've already been in similar businesses. I think it's wise to talk to advisors in this arena. Otherwise, we can quickly go after every shiny object, and our criteria regularly changes. 1 minute, we think we want a business that has few employees and regular hours. And then we see a shiny object over here that looks really interesting that I can do from, the beaches in Bora Bora. And that sounds really kind of fun. And then the next minute, oh no, the man in the van idea is a great idea. We could be bouncing all over the place. So I'm a big believer, and Kim did this by going to the professional athletes organization and getting help, is to go to some of these organizations and get some help, get some advice, engage folks that are further along this journey than yourself, and get some feedback along the way that can help you do your due diligence on these franchise systems as it relates to who you are.
I would say, Stan, you can think about it in a systematic way too, where there's literally thousands of franchise concepts out there. So you start with that universe, and then you look at the ones that maybe fit your financial criteria, your personal interest, your background, and your need to be there or be absentee, and you can start whittling that list down. And then I would, continue to engage with people that are sort of in the know. I would get close to franchisees. I would ask a lot of questions. I would read franchise disclosure documents, but it's a vast population, which is a good thing. There's a lot of franchises to choose from, right? So, but you've got to find ways to sort of whittle that down into a manageable chunk. And then at that point, I would suggest going deep, surrounding yourself with good people and asking a lot of questions.
And to the point you made earlier, she gets a lot of phone calls from prospective franchisees. The best place to learn about the day in the life and what it is to be in a business with a brand is to talk to the existing franchisees. Yep. As part of the disclosure documents that any franchisor provides to you to learn about their brand is a complete inventory of present and past franchisees. Call them all. Call as many as it takes to get as comfortable as you can get that there's a consistency of information. And sometimes that people didn't do well in that business isn't the fault of the franchisor. It could be a life changer or a situational change that occurred from the time somebody bought the franchise and then it didn't work for them any longer. So don't just get nervous from hearing somebody saying, oh, I gave it up, it didn't work for me. Dig deeper, understand why. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Ashley, are there any questions waiting for us? If not, I want to give time for something that Ricky has to share with us. Just give me a cue here.
Yeah, we do have a couple questions, and actually one of them I was going to throw to Ricky as well. So this came in along the lines of that work-life balance that we've kind of been talking about, evaluation of the right franchise to go with, and the question has to do with some of the franchisors helping with things like single parents or people who may be caretakers. And Ricky, I know that you had some information that you wanted to share on that front.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Ashley, and for everybody here. One of the things I would reflect back on first is I think some of the answers that Kimberly and Rebecca and everybody was giving was so important, right? Is about what do you need in your life? What are brand fits, and being able to talk to those entities and organizations. But, I know from our membership perspective and the IFA and the Diversity Institute perspective, we spend a good deal of time talking about with our members about, well, what does it take to build a more inclusive organization? And what are those pain points that people need? Are there support systems and layers that we can build into them to help people succeed? In some cases it's money and it's access to capital. We know within the minority community that that's a particular challenge and hurdle. And I would bet even, Philip probably even has some perspective here from the US Black Chamber perspective on, what are the ways that businesses, and particularly franchise businesses, are thinking about, they're really good about building playbooks and resources and tools to understand how those work. And I do think a lot of it does come down to being very honest about what are your needs and your capabilities for yourself. And that's one of the biggest drivers for success, and having those conversations. So for instance, one of the things I just posted for this group is the International Franchise Association keeps an online directory, a franchise opportunities guide, which is kind of like a buffet of all of different types of brands that are out there. And this wouldn't necessarily detail, this one's great for single moms, or this one has a higher minority ownership, but this is a great place to start to investigate broadly beyond maybe what you have just personally experienced in the market, and to think about growth opportunities and the like. And then you layer in something like a Zorakle where you learn more about you. Talk a lot with your family. What is it that we can support and do each other? And so how we can support each other. I could tell you just about every member I've talked to tells me the stories, just like Kimberly was saying with her kids, that the families are there. This is a family business. Everybody is in it together, and the success or failure is tied to each other. So, I would say that there's a lot of cultural conversation and evolution happening within franchise systems to address these challenges. We've got a lot of people that have been hit hard with employment, underemployment. How do we focus and support growth of businesses in particularly hard-hit communities, many of which are also minority communities? And so how can we as businesses go in and support? I know, Key Bank has a strong focus on how can we focus and support communities in particular, many of which might have some of these profiles. So I'd say a lot of it is really about honest and transparent conversations with the brands. And as everybody was just saying, talk to a lot of franchisees in your community and learn a lot about those brands and on both sides. So I'll pause there for now so we can, if others want to comment on that discussion as well.
Any further discussion there? Because I'm going to swing it back to Ricky with another point on the compass that we want to try to leave a little time to talk about as well, based on some recent research.
Stan, I just want to jump in with what Ricky said. I think
Sure.
It was so important to, especially for a potential franchisee or someone who's on this call, is to manage your expectations and understand the franchising relationship. The question was, pretty pointed to sort of a cultural, value system. How is the brand going to support me and, things that are important to me. And understand when you're doing those questions, you may not get the answer that you want, and it may upset you because you think this is the brand that I want to be a part of. But you have to understand that you're operating their business model. And so if that's not something that they value, it doesn't matter how much you hem and haw, that you're not going to get that support. So understand that if that's something that is high up on your rating scale, that may not be the organization that you want to associate yourself with. Another thing you want to consider is, going back to when you're doing your due diligence, looking at the executive level, the ownership, the founder, whoever's involved, because one of the things that I've learned over the years is, sort of this idea that there can be a reputational crisis that's beyond your control, that, if there's something, if somebody, gosh, social media can run rampant with things, but if there's something out there that maybe the owner said that goes viral, that could somehow impact your business. So you may want to really consider, sort of the potential for being with a polarizing brand, because you may operate yours very well, but you can't control what happens in, Timbuktu, Arkansas. And if that has an impact on the overall brand reputation, that could really hurt you as well. So just really kind of get to know who's in charge and their pulse for some of those different initiatives and cultural and value propositions that you're looking for.
Appreciate that very much, Kim. Thank you. Ashley, my earlier question about how the audience will gain access to be able to avail themselves of the Zorakle profile. And then I want to shift back over to Ricky.
I think that's actually probably better for Rebecca. Rebecca, how can folks go about getting that Zorakle profile?
So you can go directly to the zoracleprofiles.com website. Just take the assessment there. And Ashley, I'll send you a link also, should folks directly connect you with you, or you want to share it out.
And we'll send that around in our follow-up email along with the recording as well.
And rest assured, there will be no spam, there'll be no cost, there'll be no selling your information to anyone. This is purely for the purposes of self-education as part of your attendance here today. Ricky, I want to come back to you and talk a little in our closing moments about some of the recent research that has been uncovered by the IFA's reputation campaign, and some really terrific learnings about the differences between brands that embrace diversity and don't, and the data point around actual Black-owned businesses that are franchised having higher levels of success than independents. What can we learn from a little more discussion around that?
Yeah, thank you, Stan. As I've been reflecting on our conversation too, I was just thinking it's such a good opportunity to kind of pause and look at everything at an additional higher level too. Ashley was teeing me up for the conversation too, just about these general discussions we're having about the importance of diversity, particularly how we're looking at it in franchising, how it is a road to recovery for communities, just so many things. In terms of sustaining, hopefully a cultural revolution in terms of just, closing gaps and helping more people achieve. And so I was flagging, Stan, that I thought of some data points that I'd love to share. Philip would love to hear your thoughts too, given our audience and the membership we're talking to today. So the International Franchise Association just this past year launched our first ever franchise census. We realize there's a lot of data, there's a lot of perceptions out there about, what is or isn't franchising really all about, how is or is it not serving minority communities, women, other, people of color in general. And, a couple of really interesting statistics came back for us. We took data points both from public data sets as well as information that came into us. And two that I particularly thought I'd like to share today is that Black-owned franchises earn 2.2 times more than Black-owned independent businesses on average. And I think to some of those points, when I reflect on our discussion here today, again, it's about availability of resources, a proven plan, sometimes if it's first time business ownership in, communities that are going through transition, individuals who are just trying to find a new path forward. So that number and that statistic really jumped out to me that I thought would be interesting to share. And the other one that I wanted to do in terms of maybe in due diligence and conversations as you as individuals are talking with brands to find fits. And I think some of it is to ask conversations about diversity, inclusiveness, all kinds of strategies, because what our data is telling us is that companies with stronger ethnic and cultural diversity were 22% more likely to outperform companies lacking such diversity. So I think those are some other data points that it's interesting to talk about. We've been talking about single parents. We've been, this is the US Black Chamber. We're talking about Black owned businesses and trying to support entrepreneurs in this particular community. I think those are some of the conversations that are really worth having about brands, and our data at the International Franchise Association is bearing out that brands that are committed to these kinds of engagements and cultural diversity and supporting owners and maybe employees into ownership, they're performing and they're outperforming others. So I wanted to put that out there maybe for discussion, reaction by the panelists. Philip, your perspective from the US Black Chamber, because we're really heartened by seeing some of that, and we want to make those numbers even bigger through the work that we're doing.
No, thanks for sharing that, Ricky. And I'm very interested in seeing more on the IFA census. I want to touch on those 2 points that you talked about. First, the 2.2 times more, earning 2.2 times more than those non-franchise businesses. This is a good selling point for many of the folks who are interested in entrepreneurship and franchise ownership in our community. As you all know, during the pandemic, many in our community went to work and were relabeled as essential workers for many of the companies that actually have franchise models within their base. And so if we just took a small percentage of those folks that are considered to be high potential, high performing individuals and found a path for them through franchise ownership, then we could see that number, that 2.2 times number, probably expand even further. Second point that you talked about was having 22% more, those franchises that were more diverse, they're 22% more likely to outperform other franchises because of their diversity. I mean, think about it, it's a simple case, right? If you are a diverse organization, you have many multiple communities supporting your company, your franchise. So take a restaurant, for example. Every holiday, folks like to go out and eat. And, I think about Jersey Mike's. I love I'm guilty, but I eat the Philly cheesesteak, and I probably have eaten way too many over the pandemic, but that's neither here nor there. But everyone goes into Jersey Mike's, everyone, no matter the holiday. And so if you have this constant level of support for your organization, it just makes sense to be more diverse. And so I'm glad from a USBC perspective to hear that these data points are in place. But then there's also something I want to circle back on, and that is what Ron Busby, his story, when he was 27 years old working for Coca-Cola, he had the opportunity to be exposed to McDonald's franchise owners and had the opportunity to go and participate and work and learn the processes, the systems, and was able to then take those processes and systems and go and start his own company. And he was able to do so with family support. So all of the things that you all are talking about are very relevant to our audience, to the folks that are watching today and will watch later. And so I hope that these points aren't missed, in that there are tremendous opportunities for folks who are interested in entrepreneurship, interested in franchising. Even take it back to what Jim said, take a look at the greater population first, and then whittle it down to what makes sense for you, and then tie it to your passion. And then from your passion, look at the opportunities, and then work with organizations like the IFA and USBC to make it happen. So very encouraged to hear those data points, Ricky, and looking forward to seeing more come out of that report. And I know I've said a lot, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Phil. All right, panel, a lightning round, 2 minutes or less for closing thoughts. And Kim, can we start with you?
Sure. I think this has been a really great discussion, and I'm super encouraged just by everybody on the that came and listened in that they're already taking that first step, right? You're understanding that, look, there are some resources out there, and just continue to dive deeper, do that due diligence, and in my words, sort of be relentless in finding what you want, because it is truly possible. But you've got to bet on yourself, and you've got to put in the work, and nothing's ever going to be handed to you. So just make sure that you really understand that. And I know each and every one of you will be successful.
Rebecca.
Actually, I think I have 2 points after listening to Ricky and Philip. Diversity equals innovation. There's all kinds of great statistics around that. Innovation is a big part of a franchisor continuing to grow and evolve. So when you're looking for a franchise, diversity is a big part of that, because if you see it within the leadership, you see it within the franchisees, this is a franchise organization that will maintain their innovation and continue to be relevant. And of course, to Kim's point, know thyself inside and out, find what that purpose is, find out what that passion is, and then find a franchise organization that is a mirror image of that, where you can fully express yourself. And not only are you going to be more satisfied and more content, but you're going to be more successful.
Jim Fliss, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just want to impart a little bit of optimism to all this. I mean, this is the American dream. I think it's realistic, it's attainable. There's a wide variety of franchise concepts out there that can provide that framework and that playbook and that stability that you need. There's a lot that will fit your economic personal economic situation, your personal interest. Be true to yourself, and as you embark on this journey, at some point you got to go deep, ask a lot of questions, surround yourself with people that have done it, that have been there. There's people willing, all the folks on this call are willing to help, willing to engage, help you through the nuances of the business. We've also done a couple of other seminars. I would encourage you to, and Phil, maybe you can share how they can find those, a little bit more technical in nature, in terms of business plans and things of that nature, but some really good resources out there. But just want to thank you all for being part of this today.
Thank you, Jim. Phil, do you want to make that quick reflection on where they can find links?
Yes, and so I will drop those links into the chat, but I'll go ahead and state them now. You can find those, the previous 2 recordings at www.usblackchambers.org/webinars, and I'll put that into the chat in a second. And then real quick, I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank our moderator, Stan, as always, but I'm stuck on that 22%. And the 22% that Ricky quoted earlier. And it speaks to the point that diversity expands the pie. It doesn't shrink the size of the pie. It expands the pie. And if we're more diverse, there's more of the pie to go around to everybody. And so I think that if you're really exploring and you're serious about opportunities in franchise ownership, look for those organizations that are serious about diversity. They have positioned themselves to make you be successful right alongside them. So that's all I'll say, and I'll put the rest in the chat. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you, Phil. And before I give it back to Ricky to close us out, I want to thank my panel, Rebecca Monet and Kim Crowell, for being so giving and sharing so much information. I want to thank Phil at the Black Chamber, Karen White, who has been with us but not on stage, along with Jim Fliss at Key Bank, and of course, Ricky and Ashley at the IFA, who again, they just make all this look easy, but you really don't have any idea how much work every day goes into the heavy lifting that the foundation does through the Ed Foundation, as well as through the Diversity Institute and the other associated pieces and parts of the IFA that Ricky tends to juggle famously and just simply makes look easy. Thank you all. Ricky, it's all yours.
Well, thank you. I am truly humbled to be in the company of all of you on this call today. I think if I what I would say jokingly is what all of you said. That is everything that I would say is our takeaways. But if I think of the last two things on where I would cap it, I think my two biggest takeaways are, first, franchising is one of the most sharing communities I have ever seen. There aren't strangers in franchising, and Kimberly was, and Rebecca, everybody was speaking to this so well. Call, talk to people, ask questions. People love to share their story in franchising. And I'll tell you, the biggest thing that I have been moved about since I came over to the IFA was hearing people's stories and how they have gotten to where they are. And there is just a deep, deep interest, I think, across all of franchising, the IFA and the USBC, to help people share those journeys. And I think the last piece is a bit of our call to action. I see a comment similar to this saying, more panels and discussions like this. And I think that is what I take away as my charge. So again, huge thanks to KeyBank, to the US Black Chamber for making us these conversations possible. This is what we see as our mission at the IFA Foundation, and all of us, you're now recruited as ambassadors to go out and do the same. We can spread the word about the power of diversity in franchising. We can support our members in making sure that those opportunities continue to evolve and reflect the needs of the community, and they're supporting individuals as they come in, connect the dots between people and opportunities. That's what we're here to do. And I really look forward to staying in touch with everybody on this call, and anybody who could reach out to us individually to help people realize their small business ownership dreams. You all have been fantastic panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise today. Stan, thank you for your moderation. And again, thank you to our partners in KeyBank and the US Black Chamber. We wouldn't be here without you. And I think together we're making a difference. So thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.